All right, let's get right into it. If you're building anything on AWS, you're constantly sending data back and forth between your app and the cloud. But here's the thing, are they actually speaking the same language? Today, we're going to break down the big data formats. We're talking JSON and XML, and more importantly, how you can get them to play nice together inside AWS. So, picture this. You've just finished coding your awesome new application. Now comes the fun part, connecting it to AWS services, maybe S3, maybe Lambda, whatever you need. But that brings up a really fundamental question, right? How does your app actually talk to the cloud? How does that data get from your code to AWS and back again? Well, it's all about APIs, application programming interfaces. You can think of them as the digital messengers carrying all your requests and responses. But, just like any conversation, it only works if everyone understands the language being spoken. And in the world of software, that language is the data format. Okay, so that leads us to the big question, probably the most important one for any developer working in this space. If APIs need this common language, what's the native tongue for AWS? What format are all those services expecting when your application shows up? And the answer, pretty much across the board, is JSON. It is the default. Seriously, from IAM policies to Lambda events, API responses, you name it, AWS is pretty much built on JSON. It's the standard way data is exchanged, and honestly, that's probably the most important thing to get right from the start. Now, for anyone who needs a quick refresher, JSON, that's JavaScript Object Notation, is super popular for a few really good reasons. First, it's lightweight, which means it's fast. And second, it's really easy to read. Not just for machines, but for us humans too. It's all built on this simple idea of key value pairs. Let's take a look at a real-world example. What you're seeing here is an actual AWS security policy, and it's all written in JSON. See how clean that is? You've got a key, like version, and its value. Then you have statement, which holds a whole list of rules. It's super logical, easy to read, and this is exactly the kind of structure that AWS services are built to understand instantly. Okay, so AWS loves JSON. We get it. But let's be real. In the real world, a lot of us are dealing with older legacy systems. The ones that were built back when XML was king. So what happens when your trusty old application only knows how to speak XML? Are you just stuck? And here's the good news. Nope, you're not stuck. AWS is actually really flexible. While JSON is definitely the favorite child, the platform can totally handle other formats. So if your app speaks XML or even just plain text, you're not out of luck. This slide really shows you the difference in a nutshell. On the left, you've got an XML response from S3. Look at all those opening and closing tags. It's very descriptive, but man, it's also kind of chunky, right? A little verbose. Now look at the JSON on the right. It's so much cleaner and more concise. And for modern APIs where every millisecond counts, having less noise in your data is a huge win. All right, so we figured out that your XML app can talk to AWS. That's great. But we also know that the services on the other end, the Lambdas, the real workhorses, are sitting there waiting for nice, clean JSON. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we play translator? The answer, my friends, is the Amazon API Gateway. Now, you might think of it as just the front door for your APIs, but its secret superpower is that it's a universal translator. It can literally catch data coming in one format, work some magic, and spit it out in a totally different format before your backend ever sees it. So yeah, API Gateway is this awesome, fully managed service that does all the heavy lifting, security, monitoring, the whole shebang. But for what we're talking about today, its most incredible feature is that data transformation. It's built to intercept requests, completely reshape the data inside, and then pass it along. It was literally designed for this job. And the process is actually pretty straightforward. Here's how it works. First, your app sends its request, let's say in XML. Step 2, API Gateway catches that request and applies something called a mapping template. This is where the real magic happens. You use a language called VTL, that's Velocity Template Language, to write rules for how to turn that XML into the JSON you want. And finally, step 3, the newly transformed JSON gets sent on its way to your backend service. You might be thinking, okay, but why go through all this trouble? Can't a service like AWS Lambda just, figure out how to read XML on its own? Why is it so darn important that the data arrives in one specific format? Well, it really comes down to efficiency and predictability. Think about AWS Lambda. It's not a general-purpose web server that can just handle anything you throw at it. It's a highly specialized piece of code that's designed to trigger in response to an event. And that event data is expected to arrive in a very specific, predefined JSON structure that your code knows how to work with. And this right here is a perfect example. This is what a standard S3 event looks like when it hits a Lambda function. Your code is written specifically to navigate this structure. It knows to look for a records array, then inside that, an S3 object, and inside that, a bucket object to get the bucket name. If this showed up as XML, your function would just break. It wouldn't have a clue where to look for the info it needs. Okay, so let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. First, remember that AWS speaks JSON by default. Its services, especially things like Lambda, are wired to expect it. Second, when you have an app that speaks a different language, like XML, your best friend is Amazon API Gateway. That's your translator. And third, the tool you'll use inside API Gateway is a mapping template, which you write in VTL. Getting this data format translation right isn't just a nice-to-have, it's absolutely critical for making sure your integrations actually work. So as we finish up, I want to leave you with this one thought. Every single application you build has its own voice. It communicates with the world through its data. So the real question you have to ask yourself is this: is your AWS architecture set up to actually listen in the right language? Does it truly understand what your app is trying to say? Hey, if you got something out of this explainer, do us a huge favor and hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe share it with another developer who's banging their head against a data format problem. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.